All right, thank you so much for staying with us. To our next conversation, Woodhall Capital is mobilizing $50 billion from investors globally to bolster investments across Nigeria. Speaking at a one-day pre-investor forum put together by Woodhall Capital at the Presidential Villa in Abuja, President of Woodhall Capital, Ms. Mojisola Mponu-Wusu, said the conference was part of the firm's efforts aimed at raising at least $50 billion in global investments to support national and sub-national development projects across Nigeria. Ms. Mponu-Wusu outlined an ambitious multi-city investment roadshow aimed at unlocking financing for large-scale infrastructure and energy projects through strategic partnerships in London, Dubai.
The 36 states of the country. We're all there on 2 weeks ago on Friday, and we sat down and we engaged with various international investors, DFIs, to, first of all, the first thing we wanted to say in that room is that there's money in Africa. So again, we're looking at ADIs first, African direct investments. Investments from across Africa, where we should first and foremost encourage ourselves to invest in ourselves, because charity and fundraising should begin at home. So that confidence that you know that your indigenous African investors are behind you. Certainly when you then go to FDIs, when we then go on the road to London and we go to Dubai and we're going to Abu Dhabi, 3 cities that Woodhall Capital has offices in. So we have offices in London. So we chose London because of our affinity with the UK government. We chose Dubai because of our affinity with the UAE government. And of course, they're encouraging us to open an office in Abu Dhabi. I hope I can have time before the end of this year. We've identified it. So those 3 cities to start with. Of course, after the pre-investors forum, we did get a call from the US saying, why don't you come in here? But we'll start with those. The 36 states of the country were sat there through their FOSPA, the state investment promotion agencies, and we sat down and identified the various transactions under the Nigerian Governors Forum's AGs, who are our partners. PEBEC, of course, was there as a major stakeholder, and we sat there and we discussed the various things that we should be discussing with investors. What's good about Nigeria? Everything is good about Nigeria. Investments, there are loads of viable investments here. And of course, the chief marketing officers, the state governors, were all well represented and saying, look, come and sit with us, come and have conversations with us. We wanted people to hear from them, wanted people to understand that they are good targeted investments that should attract or be spotlighted in the continent of Africa and indeed in Nigeria.
Just indeed, just like the president would always go around and say, please come to Nigeria. Just come in. If you have any problems, come to me. My office is open. You know, but really, that's it. I agree with you that Africans, we need to take advantage. I want to take you through, because we're talking about the AFCFTA, we're talking about all of these things. How do we strengthen this relationship? But before I go there, the level of participation I saw at your gathering, highly commendable.
Thank you.
You know, the likes of the vice president represented, and also 400 participants across DFID banks, investors and all. Well, my question is, what does it tell you about the appetite for trade and investment and the collaboration between sovereign and sub-sovereign actors across the continent?
I think the first thing is that we're beginning to understand that we must first trade amongst ourselves. And I think the FCFTA, even the African Trade Gateway, with which we're partnered with Afreximbank, we're market makers and implementers of that. The first thing we're trying to say is, how can you ask people to come and invest in you when you're not willing to invest in yourself? So that national pride and dignity, right? The same way that you'd see an outfit in London or whatever, and you just feel that this is what I should get. Once you start feeling that way about African products, we know there's some way to go, but we need to actually increase that continental dignity in ourselves. I want to trade with you. One of the great things that I think the Nigerian Governors Forum has done incredibly is to use an indigenous firm to take our story to the market, right? In the past, you would use a foreign international bank to take your story to the bank. So they first signal to the international markets that we have financial services firms that are good enough, that have offices in those same places, and they can tell our story. So first, can we trade amongst ourselves? Can we give services to ourselves? Can we pay fees to ourselves? That signals to a whole bunch of investors that Africa is speaking a different language this time around. I'll tell you something. Today, before I came to the studio, a Middle Eastern bank rang me or sent us an email asking if we had transactions with the federal government of Nigeria, particularly with the central bank. That is a different intonation. That didn't used to happen. They would first ring other international banks to see if they had Nigerian transaction. Today, you know that if you want to get deals done, deals completed, you would need to look for an indigenous, not only Woodhall Capital, there's so many fine financial services firm. So if you want to do business in our country, you should at least partner with somebody or a firm from this country, from this continent. So that's the first thing, that's signaling. Trusting the investors forum to an indigenous firm. Who else can tell your story? Who else can actually tell where the spotlighting should be, where the pains are, and who else could be truthful about the work that we need to do and show you that we are willing to do that work. Nobody else can do that apart from an indigenous firm. Same thing with African products. I should first and foremost think, is there Zimbabwean products that I could buy? Before I start looking elsewhere. That national dignity, that continental pride should actually begin to rise. And then you begin to see trades amongst ourselves, then and only then will the international investors actually sit down and take us seriously, because then they see that the continent on its own is the competition, right? And therefore, they're not pricing different countries differently. They're looking at Africa and saying, look, there are opportunities here. There are people of value, people who are smart, people who can analyze those opportunities and show you the best. There are governments that are serious about doing business. And under the current governance, under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that the improved agenda, you can see the renewed hope agenda. You can see a true desire for things to be done and for conversations to be had. Otherwise, why would a private sector player like Woodhall Capital be having this conversation? So they've given us the confidence to go to the international markets and say, come and invest in our country. That is the most, I feel, the most indicative. And it's not business as usual. It's not the usual players. You're seeing new players in this field as Woodhall Capital. I think there's something happening in Nigeria, certainly something happening in the continent of Africa.
You talked about some outcomes now, notably the Woodhall Africa Trade Gateway. That's the contract and the SEAA Energy Advisory Mandate. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, so the African Trade Gateway is a digital platform developed by African Bank, and Woodhall Capital are implementers and market makers on that. The whole essence is that it's like the African Amazon, where Africans who are looking, businesses who are looking to buy commodities should first and foremost look within Africa. And so that digital platform gives you visibility to what other players in the continent have to offer before you look outside. So the African Trade Gateway, developed by African Bank and promoted by Woodhall Capital.
Interesting stuff. Now, how are you positioning yourself in this industry? Particularly, it's dominated by men. Many will say that, and I think I agree with that, really. So how are you doing that, and what advice would you give young African women aspiring to shape the economic future?
I've always said this to all the women I mentor: add value. The only reason why I'm here today is that I'm adding value. Value has no gender. Value has no coloration. If you add value to anyone, be it at home, with your children, with your employer, with your country, and certainly to your continent, you will be called, you'll be noticed. If you add value authentically, I think you'll be. So I say to women all over the place, look to add value, look to have a vision, and people will see that and say, look, what are you saying? I'm here today because somebody recognized that I should be here and said, look, there's something that Woodhall Capital has to offer in nation building. I feel that Woodhall Capital is the person to come and have this conversation, and that person is the president of Woodhall Capital, Mrs. Moji Kamfunusu. So I say to her, it could be anybody else. And of course, I say to people, and I say it all the time, you shouldn't fixate yourself on knowing people. I think you should fixate yourself in developing your gifts, developing your vision, and having something to offer when that phone call comes.
Very important. Now, how are you also, as Woodhall Capital now, strategically positioning yourself as a founder and financial advisor for sovereign and sovereign transactions, particularly for states now? I always believe that the subnationals have a role to play, very important role to play in attracting investments. Everything won't just stop in Abuja. So what role are you playing? How are you positioning yourself for that?
2 days ago, I sat on a gruesome interview, a 2-hour interview with the FOSPEA, the State's Investment Promoting Agencies, and they grilled me on why Woodhall Capital should be the financial services firm to take them to London, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. So how are we positioning ourselves? We recognize that they are strong transactions under the Nigerian Governors Forum. They've developed a digital platform called Investopedia, And Investopedia has the plethora of all transactions by the states. It's all stored in there. We would go in there, look at the viable transactions that we feel that international investors or African ADIs would be interested in. We'll filter through that. We'll have conversations with them. I'm actually about to start flying to all states, all the 36 states, before we go on the road next week, next January. We start hopefully to be on the road from January onwards. So I'm actually going to each and every state, looking through, sifting through the deals they have, looking at those that I think that African direct investments would take up, and those that I think that foreign direct investors would take up. And then we put them together, and then we get their chief marketing officers, the governors, to go on the road with us. Hopefully we'll get as many of them on the road, speaking to the international investors, showing the best of what their state has to offer and the best investment opportunities they have to offer. I'm hoping that you'll be able to come with us and cover those
that'll be a good one. Your office in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai. At least I've been to Abu Dhabi. I've been to Dubai. I think these are places that
London.
Strategic places. Yes,
they are.
Yes, very strategic. I think one of the key things that emerged was the building investors' confidence through bankable subnational projects. Now, how are you also supporting the state government? I know you've touched on that in your first submission, but you know, to translate the economic priorities now, this time around, into viable finance-ready transactions that would attract this international capital?
Yes. It's very simple. I said the Nigerian Governors Forum launched a digital platform called Investopedia.
Yeah.
Yes. So a few weeks ago, they launched that. And so you can see the readiness of it. All those transactions have been worked on with viable investment companies that have actually made those into viable business plans, right? So every single transaction that you see in there is investment ready. Is investment ready? It's ready for people to come in, look at, do the analysis, and invest. When we go on the road, I said to them, it won't be a jamboree. It will be a curated by invitation only event where investors who have identified that they are willing to invest in those highlighted transactions will be coming. And I said to them 2 days ago, we'll be signing deals. We won't be signing MOUs. I'm signing an MOU with Fosped next week, with Nasima next week. Those are things that we'll do way before the event. Okay. On the road in London, we'll be signing transactions that are ready for disbursement. So it won't be a jamboree. Some of them had their fears that we're just going to go on the road. It won't be a jamboree. Would have looked at the viable transactions, those who are bankable. Afrexim Bank has actually come up with a fund for taking some of those transactions into bankable projects. And they've assigned consultants to help to work, including Woodhall Capital, will look at those deals, ensure that the right things are being said and that they are presented in the way that investors will be able to digest and make fast and quick decisions. I won't say immediate decisions, but make fast and quick decisions. Look, we've said 50 billion, we mean it. And I've said 50 billion and I'm being conservative. There are deals in Nigeria. You just need to be speaking to the right people.
Could be more, right?
Absolutely. I feel it's a whole lot more.
Interestingly, but how does Woodhall again approach the balance between financial innovation and local realities when structuring cross-border transactions?
Well, local realities, people don't realize how international Nigeria is. I was speaking to some of my friends in London, and they were like, oh, we're going to come back and help you. I said, you're not helping us. You actually underestimate how technical a lot of the analysts are in town, right? You underestimate how local and international these days are actually flatlining. There's talent in onshore in Nigeria. There are people that can analyze these deals. The local reality is that, you know, there are local realities in every country. We shouldn't actually overplay the peculiarities of any other country. There are peculiarities in Germany. If you wanted to invest in Germany, you'd need to understand. So what I say to Nigerians, let's not overplay the fact that this is an emerging country, and there are some realities. But you'd also need to understand that if you go to the UK, you'd also need to understand that if you went to Hungary or Poland. So having the right people translating this information is key.
Very important.
Making sure, and I said to them yesterday, we are not going to beg. We are going to highlight the best of African transactions, and most especially the best of states transactions. They are there, they're viable, and I'm telling you, when we come back, I'll come back here and tell you how much we've raised on the road. Interestingly,
I would really want to hear that because I'm thinking of what types of investors and financial partners you're targeting at this time, and what sectors are expected to anchor this capital deployment.
Infrastructure, always a big thing. Infrastructure for an emerging country.
Yeah.
Infrastructure with the states also, they're looking at mining, some are looking at oil and gas, some are actually looking, or I prodded them to be bold enough to look into financial services. Look, if a state has a well-developed financial services firm, you can actually fund your deals, you can actually attract your deals, attract funding into those financial services companies or banks, and then deploy them into your transactions. So oil and gas, of course, always a big one. Right now, some countries are not keen on hydrocarbons, but would help them find those countries or those investors that are still keen on it. There's also, real estate. There's a big population explosion in Nigeria, so we're looking at real estate transactions, particularly from the Middle East also, a lot of them. The Middle Eastern investors are so active right now. They are actually very active. I think a lot of the transactions we've done, I think 70% of the funding that we've done in Nigeria this year, 2025, has been from from the Middle Eastern investors. Wow. So that's a lot, and that's why we're doing 2 states and 2 cities in the Middle East. So oil and gas, real estate, mining, there's a lot of that infrastructure, roads, bridges, industrial parks, because of course in all of this we need clusters of industrial parks that can come together and actually house these manufacturing plants. We need to build our own things. We need to do things like this and have a viable and conducive environment for those factories to be able to operate. So we're going on the road with a plethora of various sectors. We said to the investors when we come in that they should be sector agnostic, because there may be things going on in the continent of Africa that they haven't realized that it happens here. A lot of international companies have actually outsourced some of their processes to Nigeria. A lot of people don't know that. I met a young man from Ubomasho who was saying that there's a lot of onshore processing of technology in Nigeria. So we're going to be looking at industrial parks that can house a lot more of those things, and encouraging international investors to continue to invest in Nigeria, particularly with the states.
Almost finally now, governance, risk perception, and deal transparency. How is Woodhall Capital helping subnationals overcome these barriers?
I think they need to just be transparent about where their challenges are. I think if you're transparent, you'd find that you're not the only person going through that. It's when you're not being transparent, when you feel that, oh my God, this has never happened before. There's nothing that any Nigerian state is going to say that international investors have never heard of in any other parts of the country. Be confident. I think chief marketing officers need to understand that they need to be as confident. No one should tell you that an African risk is over and above anything else happening in the world. So we need to also be telling our stories. I say to the young people that you should be careful what you say about your country, because whatever you say about your country will come back and bite you, whether it's less investment coming in because you've said that it's a risky place to be. Are there challenges? Oh my God, yes, we have challenges, but so does every other country. And it's how you approach those challenges. And I said again, under the Renewed Hope agenda, under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, you can see full conversations going on public sector with us, private sector, to ensure that we're addressing those. We're not hiding, we're not pretending, we're not saying that things are all paradical, but we are saying that there are investment opportunities, there are people that are willing to work through those challenges. Just have a discussion. What are the challenges? Identify either private or public sector officials that would go through those challenges with you and help unlock some of these issues.
As we prepare for this International Investment Forum series, what message would you like to send to investors watching us today? Of course, about Africa's readiness, Nigeria's potential, and of course, your role in shaping the next chapter of intra-Africa trade and investment.
I would say to them, there's no place like Africa to be investing. There's no place like Africa.
That market is large.
It's huge and it is profitable. There's no place like Africa to be investing. There's no place like Nigeria, particularly the states. Identify the transactions you want and have a conversation with players like Woodhall Capital. What are the issues or what are your fears? And then we'll be sure to go through them with you and find ways to take out the red tape if those are the issues, or take out any incorrect risk perception on the states and if there are real risk, then let's have a conversation on perhaps how the government can help alleviate some of those, mitigate some of the risks, making sure that investment can come into those states.
Wish you all the best, and we're ready to play any role there. You know, TVC is watched very well everywhere around the world, and we would always be there. Anything you need from us. Thank you so much. I'm speaking to Ms. Moji Mponuwusu. She's the founder, Chief Executive Officer, Capital International, Woodhall Capital International. Thank you so very much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
All right.